Let's begin looking at the Route Data Miner. It's found in the My Admin area. Click on Route Data Miner, and it brings up the TriView window for the overall Route Data Miner tool. The left-hand side, we've got our query pane. We also have legend controls there. The top right, we have our interactive map, and in the bottom right, we have a results view in a tabular form. There are 6 different types of queries that we can perform in the Route Data Miner. We can look at a specific bridge crossed over, under, or a roadway segment traveled and give the number of times that that specific item was used. We can also go and get the times that every single bridge was crossed over, bridge was crossed under, or every single time that a roadway segment was traveled. Show an entire heat map and see all the results in tabular view. And any of those 6 different types of queries can be affected by all the filters that we have here in the left-hand side, with filtering on specific users, applicants, on filtering on specific vehicles, vehicle conditions, dimension, size, weights, and even filtering on specific origin and destination. And so we'll show a number of those scenarios here as we go through. Let's go ahead and start off by looking at the query condition for the number of times that each bridge is crossed over. And everything that we will do in this presentation, I'm going to try and do for a 1-month period. We'll keep the data limited here, allow us to work through pretty quickly, and also be sensitive to the value and use of the actual Maryland data here. And we thank them for allowing us to use this to show some real world examples in what we're doing. Go ahead and do a search, and the results come back and show now in our tabular window here, bridge ID, descending count by default. So we can see that the most crossed over bridge during this time period was this ID and exactly how many times it was. We can show those results on the map, and when we do that, we get a color-coded kind of thematic map. If we look at our legend, we can see exactly what we have here. So we are showing on the low end that were crossed 1 time, had to be crossed at least once, up to the maximum number of the 2,561 times. And we've gone and break down those frequencies of use in 10 different ranges and use different color coding. So the deeper browns that we see are the most highly traveled, most highly crossed over structures. And as we're going to the cooler, greener temperatures, it's the lower number of moves overall. We can come and zoom in on the map, get more detail about exactly what's going on. We can go and, as we can with any of the routing, change to any of the other views, get great visual detail of where these structures are, what interactions they may be having, work with the different modes for contrast to help out with different vision impairments. So everything there that we're used to working with our mapping, with the routing, is all available with the Route Data Miner. When we're looking at any one condition here, we can hover over any specific bridge. If we were showing roadway segments, we'd be able to hover over those and see exactly how many times that specific item was involved in travel. On the legend, there's a couple different things that we have here. The very first thing that I want to show is when we're really looking at a fit view like this, there can be a lot of clutter on the screen. And so if I say I don't want to see any moves that cross structures less than 20 times, I can put a low end filter on there. So now the map gets cleaned up a bit, and I can see where moves went that crossed over bridges 20 or more times up to our maximum of the 2,561 times. And we can jump that up even more. I can say 200, apply that, show that on a map, and now I start to see a little bit more about corridor areas and where these loads really went in higher volumes. By default, we use a legend in what we call the linear mode, and the linear mode goes and tries to take the maximum frequency and get that maximum number of frequencies split evenly over the 10 different ranges that we show different color coding on. And so we had 2,561 total maximum frequencies. We divide that by 10, and so each range will cover a frequency range of about 256. We also have an exponential range. And in the exponential range here, we try to fit this more so that we have an even number of bridges in each specific range. It's not an even distribution of the frequencies, it's an even distribution of the bridges. And so if I change to that type of legending range basis and apply the settings, now I see a little bit different. I see very low usage in a couple of the cooler colors, and we have a fewer number of bridges that are in the higher frequencies here. We can do the same type of filtering. I can go to 200 here and apply that and see exactly where that high volume movement was. But we can see when I require that a bridge be crossed at least 200 times before it's shown, we're only now seeing 520 actual structures. And so if I look at where those 520 come in, they're just in this area here. And so we're only going to see those, the top fourth of our range-based coloration here and drawing. Let's go ahead and reset this back to linear. I'm going to change this back to 1 so that we're seeing everything. Apply that. And let's look at doing some filtering, not just based on what we're showing from a legend or from a frequency basis, but filter based now more on the actual permitted conditions. So we can come in here now and say, only show me bridges crossed over where the vehicle weighed at least 150,000 pounds. I asked for the query to be done. I see the results. I see that the most that any structure was crossed was 198 times by a vehicle of at least 150,000 pounds in this 1 month time period. We go ahead and show that on the map, and I can see exactly where those moves went. We can refine that further and say, limit this to vehicles that weighed between the 150,000 pounds and 200,000 pounds. So I can do my search. I see the results. It's down from 198 to 147. And now our map updates with just those loads between 150K and 200K for the 1 month time frame. Let's go ahead and remove this 200K top end, and let's make it a 200K lower end that we're only interested in seeing moves that exceeded 200,000 pounds. And let's bring height into play. Let's say we're only going to see vehicles that were 15 feet or higher. So we're now looking at loads that exceed both 200,000 pounds and 15 feet in height. We do our query. There was a max of 12 structures that were crossed by a load that way for this 1 month time frame, and we can see exactly where that is. And it's a different area in a state where those loads focus, where we can see based on the color coding that they're focused more in the northwest here rather than around Baltimore, even around Washington, D.C. Let's go ahead and remove these two filters, and just for kicks, show 15 wide. We see that for just vehicles that exceeded 15 wide, max was 62 times, and we can see exactly where those loads went, and they were scattered around a little bit more again. We can do 15 wide and 15 high, and we're back a little bit different focus again. Okay. I'm going to go and change our type of query now, and instead of saying show me all the bridges and the number of times they were crossed. We're going to look at a very specific structure. And so I can type in my bridge ID, and as I do that, we work with a type ahead here, so that list is being constantly filtered as I'm going, and it gets to the point for the structure that I want to see specifically. I can ask for the search to be done, and right now then, our search is showing the number of crossings for this bridge where it was crossed over by a vehicle that was at least 15 feet high and 15 feet wide. And we see exactly where that was, and that it was only one time by a vehicle that met that condition. If I remove the height and width conditions and do a search, now I'll see exactly how many times that bridge was crossed over totally. We see where that structure is, and again, we can get in and do as much detailed look as we want of exactly where that is, and see that on the outer beltway here, it's crossed over 2,500 times. When we're looking at a specific item, either bridge or route segment, we have the ability to go and see the permit details. If I would click on this, I would get a table of every single permit that was involved in the use of this specific item. I'd see information about the company, the request ID, the permit ID, the overall configuration of the vehicle, and some height, width, length, and gross weight information. And I'd have hyperlinks to several different aspects of the request to be able to see the permit document itself, see status information. To protect the identity of the actual moves that we're looking at here, I'm not going to pop that up right now, but it is a feature that's available. It's a very, very beneficial, powerful tool. So you want to see who exactly was involved in crossing this bridge or on this route segment. You can narrow down by vehicle, you can narrow that time frame window down, and get the specific details about who exactly was involved in any of the crossings. The other thing that we can do here in the tabular area, and this is true of about any of the tabular result panes in SUPERLOAD throughout the entire system, is we can export the data to Excel. It's not very exciting. There's not a whole lot to export right now. We've got 2 columns, 2 cells here that would go out. But if we have our whole list of bridges and counts, or we have all of our route segment information with routes and counties and mile points and counts, there may be lots of data there that's then very convenient to go and export to Excel and have a lot of benefit externally and whatever other consumption you want to have outside of the system itself. Let's go and look at some roadway filtering now. We go and say, show me the number of times that all the roadway segments were used for this 1 month time frame. We come back and we get the details of exactly the links, the route, mile points, what county this was in, and our counts. And again, we can show that on the map. It takes a touch longer to show these roadway segments. We're going to be highlighting just about, well, in most cases, about all the roadway segments in the entire network. And so there is more to visualize and display there than when we're talking about the bridges most of the time. But it's still, pretty responsive, and you've got a lot of power and functionality at your fingertips here with all of the data that we're looking at for all of these issued permits. As with what we did with the bridges, we can come in and do any of the same kind of filtering on the roadway segments. Let's do something similar, but just a little bit different to show some other capabilities. We can come in and say, show me roadway segment usage overall, but just for special mobile equipment cranes. We'll do our search. Our results will come back in our table. We see we're down to a maximum of 44 times that any one roadway segment was crossed over for SME crane. We can show that on our map, and we see exactly where those moves have gone. And again, a little bit different than the overall total permit volume, where there's the precedence priority using the roadways around Baltimore. When we're looking at just the special mobile equipment crane here, we've got the loads that are a little bit more focused around the Washington, D.C. area. Let's go ahead and clear that out. and add a different condition here that says show us all the moves that originate from Delaware. So in this case here now, the query done, if we see a maximum of 291 times that any roadway segment is crossed for a move that has an origin of Delaware. And if we show that on the map, we're going to see some interesting things start to happen and be displayed here. We've got our Delaware border with Maryland, comes right through here. And we can see that there are multiple places where the loads are starting at the Delaware line and moving somewhat west, south, slightly south, slightly north from Delaware into and through Maryland. We can go and let's look at our legend here again and see we've got between 1 and 291 uses. Let's go and clean that up just a little bit and say, just show me where there was at least 20 moves that were made. And now instead of the many different places that the loads are coming across on state and other lower level roadways, we see that we're down now to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, 7 main places where those higher volumes of loads move through. And if we go and look at just when there was at least 50 moves that were made, we see that it's even a little bit different here, and that now all the moves at the higher priority came through this area here. Now it's interesting, we've got this this area where we start to see some usage here not showing at the border, and the reason why there was that there were different segments that were used coming out of the state that filtered into this area and then went on and were used at that higher volume. So, you know, we start to see some interesting things develop as we use these different types of filters. Just a whole lot of very powerful data at our fingertips here. And let me go and just finish up with one more condition. Let's limit this to say we want to go from Delaware to Pennsylvania. We do that search. We see that there was 13 moves in this time frame that are considered, and we can see exactly where those went. So these are moves which, where did they come into the state from? And they were set to have a destination somewhere on the Pennsylvania line. So we see some real powerful movement flows, freight corridor, planning type of data here. Again, we can take all of your historical data, do about any kind of querying that you want, and result in some very beneficial data analytics for so many different purposes.